Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing a brand new jungle tier list for 11-14. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. It's quick, it's easy, just takes a couple of clicks. So if you do that for me, please, it helps out a ton, especially if you watch a lot of videos on the channel. We stream on YouTube every night starting around 11:30 or midnight Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. I try to talk as much as I can while I'm playing, and I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about, whether it's my jungle tier list, my support tier list, you know, any other guides that I have, the gameplay, or any other game, or anything. Just come by, chat, very friendly, very chill. And then I am covering some other games as well if you're interested in some non-league stuff. I do Total War, Warhammer, Legendary campaigns. I'm going to get back into that. Then I've been doing some MMO stuff as well. We're doing some raids on a Restoration Druid for Burning Crusade Classic. That's at 9:30 on Wednesdays. Usually goes 9:30 until about 12. Thursdays, sometimes we go a little bit as well, from about 9:30 to about 11:30, depending on how long the raid takes. Then I'm also going to be covering some Final Fantasy XIV soon as well, if you're interested in that. I'm going to be releasing sort of just standalone YouTube episodes that are about an hour long of sort of my leveling journey and what I think about the game. And then if it's popular, then, you know, as we get up a little bit further and we start raiding and doing some more in-game stuff, then we might end up streaming some of that as well. So we'll see where that goes. But anyways, let's go ahead and get back in here. So you'll notice a common theme among a lot of these top-level champions, top 4 or 5 champions, right, where they're going to have some kind of built-in healing in their kit. Usually they take healing runes, and often they have some kind of healing item as well. So healing is really OP on them. And then they usually have some kind of defensive capabilities in addition to that, where they can either go invulnerable or become untargetable, or just do some other stuff that's going to make them very difficult to kill. So they're very resilient. They put out a ton of sustained damage, so they can hard carry games. And usually they have pretty good mobility as well. Various gap closers or slows or just otherwise stickiness, so they can stay on people. And that's, you know, the holy trinity of imbalanced in League of Legends, right? In my opinion, is durability, damage output, and then mobility. And then I guess as a fourth one, you could add in there the holy square of unholy square of balance, I guess, would be utilities. They have some kind of other debuffs or buffs or just other stuff about them that makes them valuable to teams. And I think that all of these champs have that. Could be crowd control, could be, you know, whatever. Let's go ahead and check these out. So I think the top 5, and I almost had Diana up here, but I think that she is decidedly a step down from Gwen at like really high level play. But I think that you could definitely put her up here in the top 5. But these are pretty much interchangeable depending on who you're good on. I think a lot of times they all hover around like a 50% win rate or so. It just depends on how strong you are, and some of them are good in like different situations, but I think they're all very top tier picks that can be solid. The cat keeps knocking over stuff over there. That can be solid depending on you know, the champion select and how good you are on certain champs. But anyways, let's start with Viego, because I think almost everybody recognizes this guy is really, really strong right now. And there are a couple of things that go into that. Number one, and this is the thing that you're going to see with all of the runes that I just mentioned, is they're all going to take Conquer, they're all going to take Triumph, and then usually they're going to take the extra attack speed, and then one of these, whichever makes sense. And then usually they're going to go for Boots, and that's because they all have 345 movement speed. So it's basically like they get free boots anyways compared to like an 80 carry. So they can afford to wait on that movement speed. It gives them an extra effectively 300 gold once they complete those boots, so that allows them to get up to their mythic even faster. And also they don't have to pay money anymore to transform the jungle item. That's been a thing in Season 11, and that's what has precipitated a lot of these hard carry jungles, is they don't have to spend the 650 gold to transform their initial item into the jungling item anymore. So that's 650 gold, then you basically get 300 extra gold in your pocket. So it's like 950 gold if you take the magical footwear. So that allows them effectively to get their mythics, you know, for around a support price, right? For like 2,500 gold price. compared to like the solo laners who are also getting the mythics and have to pay money for their initial items, a lot more than the 350 that the Ember Knife costs or whatever. So anyways, that's why we've seen mostly carry jungles take over a lot in this season, is because it's so cheap to have those items. They get so much gold and so much experience out of the jungle that they can just leapfrog ahead of some of the solo lane carries. But just wanted to point that out. That's pretty standard. And then he's going to go for Divine Sunder in here. And I think that's probably the best item on him. You have seen Kraken as well in the past. They do have a similar win rate. Kraken is slightly higher, I suppose, but it depends on the, you know, what you need to do, like how many tanks they have and things like that. Kraken is very good because he does have multiple ways of proccing the on-hit damage within his kit, like over and over and over again. But I tend to like Divine Sunder, I think, a lot of times because just having that little bit of extra tankiness is just so nice so that you don't get blown up immediately in a fight and you have a better chance to get one of those kills with your ultimate and start getting those resets and snowballing with all of the fresh new abilities that you have and being able to go untargetable multiple times, all of that healing. So I think a lot of that fits really, really well with this kit. And you also get the armor penetration and the magic penetration, which is very good for him. So obviously Kraken is good if you're just going to be able to stand there and just hammer away at tanks, if that's what you're going to be doing on the front line. Kraken can be solid, but I tend to like Divine Sunder as well, especially against other high burst champions that, you know, maybe aren't going to be as tanky, where you don't need that true damage as much. So I think that's solid. Then you're just going to go either Mercury Treads or Plated Steel Caps. Blade of the Ruined King is almost always what you go second. This just pairs so well with his Q and his auto attacks. I mean, it's named after him, right? Like, his Q is literally named Blade of the Ruined King. So it was built for this item. He likes everything about it. The attack speed, the lifesteal, the percentage health damage. It's just all extremely good on him. So you almost always want to go Blade of the Ruined King second. And then I would go some kind of additional, like, defensive bruiser item. Sterix is the main offender you'll see on a lot of these champions. That shield is just absolutely ridiculous. It makes it almost impossible to blow somebody up and just gives you time to just get all of your extra healing out of your Conqueror, your Triumph stacks, just all the other healing that you have built into your kit. It's really good. So, you know, again, I have Viego up here just because he snowballs so hard in team fights with the resets, the healing, the extra ults, the untargetability, the fresh ability sets, you know, basically having no cooldowns whenever you get those resets and you get to use the enemy's abilities. So just very good at dueling, pretty good at taking down objectives, good at taking down Baron once he gets the Blade of the Ruined King, Kraken, you know, all that kind of stuff, or even DS is still going to be pretty good. So lots of different options in terms of builds. Wit's End is a good option if they have a lot of AP. If you're dueling something like a Diana or a Gwen, then this can be a pretty solid option. But yeah, and then, of course, you know, in his kit, like we talked about, he has a lot of that survivability. He has lots of maximum percent health. That's another thing you'll see a lot of them have is tank breaker stuff. They'll either have percentage max health damage or true damage built into their kit usually. So in a front-to-back team fight, he can have a little bit of a problem getting to the back line, but you can just mow down the front line so fast anyways. A lot of times it just doesn't even matter. So I think he's super strong right now. He's definitely S tier, so I have him at number 1. Another one that I think is, and this is one where I think that Pro actually coincides really well with solo queue. You'll notice the top 5 in Pro, at least in terms of presence, are going to be the 5 that I mentioned here. And they all have, like, good win rates in Pro. I guess, like, Xin Zhao is only at 50%, but the other ones are pretty good. But I think that this kind of stuff does work really well in YOLO queue. Versus with support, I think the support meta is very different from Pro to solo queue. Well, not, like, ultra different, but, like, pretty different. But with jungle, I think it's very, very similar. Which just kind of goes to show just how powerful these champions are, because a lot of these are skirmisher, you know, type of champs. And, you know, historically in Pro, at least without this season set aside, and maybe last season, it's been a lot of, like, engaged tank, you know, team fighter type of stuff. But the skirmishers are just so OP this season that they're even playing them in Pro. Okay, so let's look at Nocturne here really quick. So Nocturne did get a bit of a nerf on this patch, but he's still doing all right win rate wise. You'll notice as well that, like, Nocturne's an 84% presence, and Xin Zhao is literally 98% in pro. That's almost unheard of. That's almost literally every single game he's picked or banned, and somehow he wasn't nerfed on this patch. None of the items were nerfed. It's like, what? But anyway, so what's making Nocturne so strong right now? And he, you know, after the nerf, he's still 52.5%. And he's very popular too. So that means that, well, not, I guess not like ultra popular, but 9% is pretty popular in the jungle role because it's such a diverse role. So what is it about Nocturne that makes him so strong? The nerf was mostly for solo lane Nocturne as well, like top and mid lane, so it did not affect jungle that much. Well, Stride Breaker is still like extremely powerful. They barely tapped it on this patch, and some might even say it was a buff. They gave it 5 AD, 100 less extra health, and now the movement speed is slower for sure. So I guess it's definitely a nerf on that end. But I would say it's probably a buff overall for Nocturne pre-rework. When they took away the movement speed and gave it the extra damage, that's where it really went off with Nocturne. He's still pretty good with it, even after the nerf on this patch. But as per usual, he's going to have Nocturne, or he's going to have Conquer and Triumph. They really, really, really need to take the healing off of Conquer. Like, there's just too much healing. And they need to nerf Triumph, like, take it down to 10% or 8% and start from there, because it's just too much. It's still too much. I know they nerfed Ravenous Hunter, but people are still, like, just have way too much healing. So, anyways, they took the true damage off of it, but I think they gave it healing instead of the true damage. This is like a year or two ago, but it's just been a really problematic rune basically since release. Just bring back Fervor Battle. What's wrong with just giving people like a big chunk of AD without any of the extra survivability? I don't know, but anyways, well, he has really good clear, so you know his Q, his auto attacks, his passive healing in the jungle just keeps him topped off. He, you know, plows through the jungle pretty quickly. Very good dueling power if he hits that Q early, because it gives him so much extra AD, and then I believe it gives him extra attack speed if he absorbs, you know, one of their CCs with his W. So he's kind of hard to CC with the W. Gives him an extra layer of stickiness. His E, that Nightmare, gives him extra movement speed to stick to people. It fears them. It does some like okay damage early on. So he's got a couple of different tools that make him very difficult to peel. And then of course you have his ultimate, where he can just kind of jump on people from off screen, and you know, combined with the W and the E, it makes it almost impossible to get away, especially if his flash is up. If you try to flash his E and he flashes after you, you're pretty much dead. So he can very easily get to the back line and disrupt the AD carries, usually kill them. And now he can actually fight his way out of it. Before, it was, you know, kind of a suicide mission. If you picked, you know, like Lethality Nocturne and went in, yeah, you might kill the AD carry, but you're going to die on the way out, right? And, you know, sometimes that was a good trade, sometimes not. But now you don't have to do a trade, right? You just take Stride Breaker and Sterix, go onto that back line, everyone's going to collapse to try to help peel the AD carry, and then you can just start, you know, hitting people with your passive, doing that AoE healing swipe. You've got the Stride Breaker for the AoE damage, and you have tons and tons of time, you know, with Sterix and that big shield to just land more and more auto attacks, stack up your Conquer, get some Triumph procs, and just fight your way out of it. So he's just a real terror. He's very hard to deal with. And then with that ult, also, it just causes so much disruption on the map. Sometimes people aren't really sure where he is, where he's going, who he's targeting, especially in solo queue, where you're not on comms. You know, right? Even in professional games, it causes a lot of disruption, and they're on comms, and they're very smart players, obviously, and they're trying to communicate, and they have a game plan on how they want to deal with Nocturne, and he's still good, even in pro. So just imagine in solo queue, where people just aren't even paying attention to anything in the game, and then he's casting that. Oh, hi. So yeah, he's really strong right now, and then it's just pretty much Stride Breaker. I don't think you want anything else. That extra slow and the extra burst damage combined with your ult is really nice. You know, some people are still going like Gore Drinker, but I don't think you need to do that. I would just stick with the Stride Breaker Sterix combo. And then after that, it's kind of up to you. GA can be good, or Black Cleaver if you're dealing with tanks. So yeah, Nocturne's still going to be really strong. Not a lot new going on there. He's been taking Stridebreaker for a while, but I still think he's very good in the jungle, even if he has been nerfed in solo lanes. Okay, Xin Zhao, Mr. 98% here. Presence in pro. Still very, very good in solo queue. And you might ask, well, why is he not number one? And like I said earlier, he very well could be number one. He's really good at dueling. I just have him down a little bit because I feel like he can be dealt with more than some of the other champs in the later game. If you can survive him in the early game, I think it's a little easier to peel him than someone like a Nocturne, or I don't think he's going to have as much like reset potential and just total domination like Viego or like Gwen and things like that. But he's an extremely good duelist. He's probably the best early game champion right now, or certainly like at the top end of my list. He's going to outduel pretty much everybody in the early game. So does a tremendous amount of damage. Got the standard OP runes with Conqueror, Triumph, Boots, Cosmic Insight. Now, it says he does take Gore Drinker quite a bit. I think DS can be pretty good on him too, potentially. Just kind of depends, again, on how much you need to tank. But Gore Drinker is very nice because he is going to be on that front line, so having even more lifesteal is good. And then, of course, he has to have lifesteal in his kit, just like everybody who's at the top of the list. But the big thing that has made Zen so much stronger over the last few patches, of course, is his E, his stab, and being able to jump to them at like 1,000 units away, because, the main way that you dealt with Zen before was you would just kite him out, right? Or you would just stay out of his range so that he would not be able to dash to you. I think the dash is like 600 range or something, so you could just try to kite him. But now it's so much harder with that E that he's basically almost like Lee Sin-esque, able to just jump right on you. And if you stick, if he can stick to you in combat, then you're pretty much going to lose most duels. Is that the cat, or it's probably the cat scratching a box or something?
Yeah. Okay. Or it was still sound asleep.
Yeah. And then Sterix, of course, because I think that's probably the most OP item, or it's the one that you see on like almost all of these AD type of champions as a second or third item. The Mythic changes occasionally, but that Sterix is always in there somewhere. It turns out like getting an extra 1,000 health, or more on an item that also gives AD is actually pretty good. But anyways, he has a lot of stickiness, and then against ranged champions, they just can't interact with him. Whenever he ults, the AD carry just can't do anything about it, so he can just come up and duel them. Either duel the AD carry and stick to him, or if he can't, he can kill some other squishy, and then the AD carry's not going to be able to disrupt him. So really, really powerful duelist, especially in the early game. Again, I just think that his late game is not quite as devastating as Viego or Nocturne or Gwen or really Diana. I think he's much more of a almost assassin type of mentality, but he can definitely take over. So he's really, really strong too. And then Gwen is another one that I have up here, and she might be a little more controversial because she's the first one where the win rate's actually negative, I think, in solo queue a little bit. But she is very strong in pro, and I think a lot of people maybe just have not practiced her enough in solo queue to be effective. It's not that bad. It's like 49%. The other people were like 51.5% for the most part. I think Viego was like 50. But I do think that she has a lot going on for her that can make her strong. Obviously in pro, she's 57%. Now she's banned a lot, and part of that is because I think she can be flexed to like top lane and be very strong too. Versus like Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is actually banned quite a bit too. But some of these other champs are less flexible. Like Viego, I don't think is really in solo lanes that often. So, he evades some of the bans. But she's only been picked 35 times. That's a pretty low sample size, although she's been banned like a billion times. But what is it about her that makes her strong? Well, it's the same thing it's been about all these champions, just about that I keep talking about over and over again. She's got the Conquer, she's got the Triumph. Now, she mixes it up a little bit. She adds in that Ravenous for even more healing, because a lot of her damage comes through her abilities. And then Sudden Impact is just so good because she dashes around so much, and she's going to be auto-attacking a lot as well. And yeah, her auto-attacks on hit do a lot of magic damage, but they also just do, like, normal auto-attack physical damage as well. So even though she's not building AD, the lethality actually does have value just because of how much she autos. So sudden impact is particularly strong on her because she likes both the magic penetration and the lethality. But she's got a lot of the same stuff in her kit. She's got a lot of maximum % health damage. Every auto attack does a little bit more. Whenever she does those snips, if you're in the middle, it's going to do the true damage. She has lots of chase potential. I think it's her E that's the dash that gets like a 50% reset, not including your ability haste that you have in your kit. So she can just dash every like 4 seconds, kind of like Fiora. And yeah, she just runs you down, sticks to you. And she just has a free, like, basically a Xin Zhao ultimate on, like, a 22-second cooldown before ability haste. So, really, probably, like, a 14-second cooldown after ability haste. So, yeah, it turns out that's just really, really good. And not only that, not only does she just not take damage like Xin Zhao, you can't even target her. I guess she can still take damage from AoE splash stuff. Like, if you get hit with a Jinx... If someone's standing next to you and they get hit with a Jinx rocket and you're in the radius, you're still going to take damage. You just can't be targeted. But I think in many ways that could be even better. Because Zen can still be, I believe, he can still be CC'd during that, right? Like, Thresh can still hit him with a hook. Janna can still blow him back. You know, all of that stuff. He just has not dealt any damage by people who are outside the radius. Gwen can't even be targeted. So you can't even, like, peel her back if you're outside of that radius. No Thresh hooking, no nothing. That requires a target, right? You can still go in with Recon and CC her because that's not targeted with like your W knockup, but she's just extremely strong, very obnoxious, very fast, tons and tons of damage, got lots of healing built into her kit, true damage, the whole 9 yards for everything that's OP that really shouldn't exist on the same champion. She's got it. 345 move speed. So yeah, now a lot of people go for Nashor's Tooth on her early. And it's just because she scales so well with attack speed and just how much that stacks up with her passive and stacks the snips for her Q. The Snippy or whatever it's called. And it's just a really efficient item as well. It does a lot of on-hit damage, which is, again, very good with everything she's doing. The snips apply on-hit. Ability power and attack speed. So early on, she is going to be a little bit more vulnerable to getting blown up. So that's why I have her just a bit lower, because she's not going to be getting... you know, Divine Sunder, and she doesn't have like as much built-in shields and all that kind of garbage that some of the other champs do. And even on her second item, it's not that much healing, right? On Riftmaker, it's 8% Omnivamp, which is good, and this adds extra true damage. But basically, if you can catch her, you can blow her up, potentially, versus that's not necessarily the case on someone like Xin Zhao or Nocturne or Viego, right? Because a lot of times they're taking a health item first. Whether it's Divine Sunder or Stride Breaker or Gore Drinker, they all have, you know, a lot of health on them. And usually some other defensive stuff too, right? When we're thinking about Divine Sunder and the healing built into it, or you think about Gore Drinker and the healing built into that. So she is squishier, but I would say she has even more potential, like just hard 1v9 than some of those other champs, because in team fights, that snip, don't forget, that's AoE with those scissors. So if everybody's grouped up and she's just like snipping everybody for true damage and just throwing needles through everybody, it's just like an insane amount of AoE damage. So if you've ever played against a good Gwen, it's very scary. And a lot of people are still kind of bad on her, but people are learning, you know, it's going up. If you look at these pick rates, game counts, it's going up. Now the win rate's going down because more people are picking her because they're not good, and she's got a learning curve to her. But once they figure her out, she's very, very strong. And I think that she probably has the highest potential to go up in future patches if she doesn't get directly nerfed. She does have a 68% presence in Pro, so it's less likely she gets nerfed technically, you know, in what they've spelled out before when they've talked about their decision-making process behind nerfing stuff. In Pro, it's not supposed to get nerfed unless it has an 80% presence, or that's kind of the red line there, right? Where if something's above that, it's a really high chance that champion gets nerfed. But below 80%, it's a much lower chance. So she does get banned a lot. She does get talked about a lot, I think, in Pro, and she has a pretty good win rate, but she doesn't have that high presence. And then in solo queue, her win rate's not really that high. Now, they also banned, or like, nerfed the heck out of Akali on this patch, and I don't think she was as problematic. She's at 77%, so she was pretty close. But they ended up nerfing her like really hard on this patch. So it's not a hard and fast rule. They could still nerf her. But if it's item nerfs, I don't think her items are going to get nerfed. And that's why I think she has the greatest potential. If you want to learn something right now in the jungle that can be really OP, that's probably going to last for multiple patches, she would be my go-to. Just because her items are different from these. I think eventually Riot's going to wake up and figure out that, you know, a lot of these items are just too strong. And they're going to start chipping away at them, right? Like Sterix, Divine Sunder. Now, a lot of those items have been so strong for so many patches, people just switch it around, right? When Gore Drinker was really good and that got nerfed, people just switched over to Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker gets nerfed really hard and they buff Divine Sunder. They just get Divine Sunder. So these champions just have an embarrassment of riches in terms of their itemizations right now. So it's possible they don't get nerfed out, but I would highly suspect they start chipping away at those types of items. And they might even start chipping away at stuff like Conqueror. Now, she takes Conqueror too, but these things I keep, you know, complaining about and talking about, all these champions are getting this stuff and it's too strong. The healing is too good. She's least affected, I think, of these 4 champions from item nerfs. So that's my recommendation to you. If you like high skill cap champs, you want to play something that's really strong and try to learn it, and that's probably going to be really good for the next little while, I recommend Gwen. So, you know, maybe in a couple of patches, I'm going to be eating my words when she gets directly nerfed, but I think she's a good choice. Okay, moving down to Diana here. The only reason I have Diana a little bit lower is I feel like there's a bit more counterplay to what she has. Like, if you dodge the Q, then she loses so much damage and so much gap closing potential, and she has no way of getting out. Like, her mobility is really conditional. She can't escape with it. Like, I just kind of compare her to Gwen, where Gwen can just kind of run away if she gets into a weird situation. She can jump over walls, which is huge, to go in for a gank, to get around wards. Diana can't get around walls. There are other champs that can't either. In fact, a lot of them on this list, you know, are going to have a hard time jumping over those walls, at least at the very top. Like, Nocturne's got to walk around until he's level 6. Zen's got to walk around. But I just think if you want a sustained magic damage champion, I feel like Gwen is just going to be a little bit better. Now, Gwen's not going to have as much upfront burst earlier on. Like, if Diana hits everything at level 6, she's going to do more damage than Gwen, I think. Before anyone can really fight back. So Diana has higher burst potential, but her sustained damage, I think, isn't as high. She's easier to peel in CC because she doesn't have the Shroud that Gwen has, and she doesn't have that consistent low cooldown gap closer to stick to people. She also, against like tanks, she does not have true damage or percentage health, whereas Gwen has both of those. So if you happen to be trying to kill something like a Volibear or a Nunu, a Sejuani, you know, something like that out of the jungle, it could be a little bit harder. But she is still very, very good. Has that burst damage, really high magic damage. So I think she's nice. It is very good to have an AP option as well. I didn't really mention that about Gwen, but since so many comps are super heavy on AD, your AD carries are pretty much always going to be AD, obviously, except for like Ziggs. And then people are playing a lot of like these AD skirmisher top lanes, your Irelia, you know, type of champs. And then even in the mid lane, you're seeing a decent chunk of AD champions as well. So having the super heavy, like hard AP threat that they have to respect, they have to get magic resist or they die, out of the jungle is very, very nice. So Diana does have that going for her, and you could definitely make an argument to put her in S tier if you want to. Okay, Kha'Zix is the next one that I think is decidedly a step down. I guess I'll go ahead and put Diana up here because I feel like these 5 really are different than the ones below them. I think it is a step down when you go to Kha'Zix. So I think that Gwen is like a pretty good chunk higher than Diana, but Diana is still like in this conversation. So I'll go ahead and move her up there. Kha'Zix is the next one down, and he has a pretty high win rate. But my thing with Kha'Zix is you have to be very good at positioning with him. You have to get flanks. You have to find squishy champs because I just don't think he's as good against some of these bruiser type of champs in traffic. You have to get isolation. It has to be squishy, I think, early on. And he does a lot of damage, but he can actually be killed. And that's why I have him a little bit lower. Sort of like Diana and Gwen, but they have like more defensive tools. He has virtually nothing aside from his invisibility. So he has to come up invisible, get that kill, get the Dustblade proc, and then get out of there. Or reset and kill somebody else. Like, he cannot stay visible just attacking people for any real length of time, or he's going to get blown up by other champions. So I think that is the main thing that holds him back. And he doesn't have any CC. You know, his mobility is somewhat limited. He does have a jump, but it's a long cooldown unless you evolve the upgrade for the reset. So, anyways, he's good. He can assassinate, but it requires a lot of positioning, really good vision control, and just stalking and hunting people down. And it's just a more difficult play style than just run at them and kill them. You know, like Xin Zhao. And he really doesn't have the plan B. Like, Xin Zhao at least can go kind of tanky, can soak up a lot of that frontline damage with his ultimate. You know, it's going to take a while to take him down, and he can, you know, tax the resources of the enemy quite a bit. Kha'Zix, you know, he's done. If they spot him and he doesn't kill somebody immediately, he's done. He doesn't have, like, the really OP runes. So, again, if they nerf all of those, you know, the top 5 OP champs, which is going to be hard to do unless they nerf them directly, because most of them are taking different items, or they have different item choices, I should say. But if we do go back to hard assassin meta, he's, you know, going to be probably number 1. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think it's like, why play an assassin when you can play an assassin, tank, you know, diver carry champion, right? It's like, why just go for one thing when you can play champions that have 4 different, you know, properties about them? That's mostly it. It's not that Kha'Zix is bad. It's just these champions can do a similar thing and a lot more on top of it. Ivern's another one that's a little weird, but I think in certain team comps he could potentially be very, very good if you have like a tank as a support, so like a Nautilus or a Leona or even Thresh or something like that, and you have multiple carries already on your team and you just want that glue that can hold it all together potentially. I think Ivern could be really good. Now, they have buffed him multiple times. They're really trying to make him a thing. They also buffed up Moonstone. He has the highest win rate, I believe, of any champion that I've looked at so far. But he has a really low play rate, and he's just weird. He's actually really hard to play. Just because you have to be able to control Daisy properly. And a lot of it is you have to have so much extra foresight with planning your camps, because you can't get them immediately for a long time, right? You have to touch them and then go do something else for 30 seconds and then come back and get them. So you need to know where the enemy jungler is so they don't cut you off at your camps or take your camps while they're charging. And you're going to be weaker in the early game, right? Because you're not going to be able to take the camps immediately. So it does have that extra layer of planning built around his kit, and you're also going to be low health in the early game, so you really don't want to get intercepted. So extremely weak early game. You're going to get dominated if they invade you. And this is part of why you almost never see him in pro. Is because he can just get dumpstered early. But his items are still, like, a lot of the stuff that has made him strong historically still makes him strong. Your items are very, very cheap. So you still have, you know, the cheap jungle item that I mentioned with all the other champs. But you can also get, like, the 2,500 gold mythics. Then a lot of times you're getting stuff like Ardent Censer or the Putrefier, Staff of Flowing Water. All of these items are, you know, very, very cheap, like 700 or 800 gold cheaper than a lot of the carry items. So that is good. And shields are still very, very strong out there. There is that shield breaker item, but a lot of people aren't getting that item, and it's just not really performing that well. So he's not really good if you have another enchanter on your team. It's kind of rough. If you have like a Janna and then you pick Ivern with that, that's just too many squishy champs with too many shields. I think, personally, that could make you vulnerable to something like the Shield Breaker item. The Shield Breaker item is very good against Sterix, and Sterix is OP right now. So there are people that are getting that item. So he's okay. I think he has a lot of potential if you're really good on him. Obviously, Tyler won last season, got to Challenger. I think just spamming Ivern which was hilarious because it's like the polar opposite of his like online persona. It's like this very chill, you know, like Thoreau kind of character in the woods, and then Tower 1 is this very, I don't know, almost like barbarian type of personality. But anyways, I think he has been buffed a lot. I think he can be good. His win rate is good right now. You just have to kind of find the right comp for him and be really proficient on him. Okay, Lee Sin's another one that I think is still pretty good. He has been nerfed. I forgot exactly what they nerfed about him. I think it was his E damage, which is like his guaranteed damage and his AoE wave clear and things like that. But he's still pretty good. He's got a 51% win rate, which is very nice for Lee Sin. You got to remember, he's an extremely high skill cap champ, and a lot of people are not good on him. So anytime you have a champ like that that's at 51%, they're actually pretty good. You know, anytime you see like Thresh or Rakan, Lee Sin, even like Yumi, Azir, Akali, Irelia, anytime like some of these champs get up to like 51 or even 50, they're pretty good in a meta. So, anyways, he's still going to go just Gore Drinker. I feel like Sterix is probably better than Cleaver. I don't know. Cleaver is pretty good, and he does stack it up really fast with, you know, a lot of the different abilities he can spam. So yeah, it is Sterix second. That item's just so busted right now. It looks like Stridebreaker is actually way better than Gore Drinker statistically, so that's something to consider. It's a shame they nerfed Prowler's Claw because that was a really fun interaction with Lee where you could just kind of zip behind him and kick him, but it was nerfed like really, really hard. So that item's kind of out, but I have him a bit lower than some of the other ones because it's a lot harder to solo carry as him. It's kind of weird to think about why, because he does have good, multiple good gap closers, right? He can use his shield jumping ability. He can use his Q to connect. He can do a lot of burst damage with his Q and his kick, but he just doesn't have that sustained damage as much in his kit because he doesn't have true damage, he doesn't have maximum percent health, and he doesn't have a lot of defensive steroids, right? He has the shield. He gets some, you know, amount of lifesteal from his W, I think, his like second activation on his W. But it's just not the same. It's not the same as like Nocturne's you know, spell shield plus nightmare in terms of stickiness and the healing off of his passive, or Gwen's true damage, or you know, all the nonsense that Viego has going on. He just doesn't have quite as much. But he is probably a better playmaker if played at absolute perfection than some of those other ones. If he can get behind people and kick like a key carry out, then he could potentially have some of the best backline access and sort of kill conversion of anybody. So he is still really, really good. You are seeing him in pro. He's doing all right, like 52%. So still a very strong champion, just super high skill cap and not as much like 1v9 YOLO Q carry, I think, as some of these other options. But he's still going to be strong. Then I got Nunu here next, and you know, Nunu has fallen a little bit from grace. I think he's the one where it's like if you're auto-filled in the jungle, or you're new in the jungle, or you just want to pick jungle as your off role, you're a support, and you just want to play something that's pretty simple, that's effective, I think that Nunu's probably your go-to. Now again, like tanks aren't like kind of these pure tanks like Nunu aren't as great of the meta because they're just going to get annihilated by these carry champs late game. Because they're like, your armor's just not going to do anything, or your magic resist is just not going to do anything because they have so much true damage, so much sustain and healing, that they're just going to be able to eat a lot of your CC. Either they're going to kill you really quickly, or they're just going to eat your CC and sustain through it. So that's why he's kind of fallen out of favor here. Is just he just doesn't do as much sustained threat as some of these other champs do. He doesn't abuse Conquer. He doesn't abuse, like, you know, Nashor's Tooth or Gore Drinker, Sterix, DS, Stridebreaker, all that stuff. He just doesn't, the items just don't suit him, and the runes don't suit him right now. But just the baseline effectiveness in his kit, he can still work. Like, you've got the Snowball, which is very, very good in the early game at getting some of these ganks. You can come up the lane, you can go down river with Scuttle, and it's so fast that even if people have those little shallow wards, like in Tribush, in the bot lane, or just in that little river bush that's like near the lanes, Usually if you're coming off of the scuttle, like going max like warp speed with the snowball, it's too late. They can't move. And a lot of times, even if they flash, if you get the angle right on your snowball, you can still hit them, even after the flash. So he has some of the premier early game ganks in the game, especially for a tank. He still has the ability to just like muscle his way into objectives, right? So you can still chomp plus smite, and it's still going to guarantee you scuttles, guarantee you Baron, dragons, you know, whatever. So he does have the safety of the smites. He is still very difficult to kill for most of the game until those champs I mentioned before get to like 2 or 3 items. It's going to take a while to hack through him because he's got the lifesteal off of his Q, he's got the shield off of his ultimate, does pretty respectable base damage, a lot of CC between the snowball, the big snowball with your W, your E with the little snowballs. He has a lot of slows and a lot of, you know, a lot of CC built into his kit. Not like hard CC, but like just kind of those slows. It's pretty handy. However, they have nerfed Deadman's. They just buffed it a little bit this patch, but losing that 20 bonus movement speed is a pretty big deal when a lot of your ganks are predicated on that movement speed with the snowballs. He is still going Sunfire, which does give you, you know, pretty good tankiness, pretty good clear. You can get Thornmail second, which is helpful against some of these lifesteal champs, but remember they nerfed Thornmail pretty hard a while back, and that's another reason that all these lifesteal champs are just going wild, is because Thornmail is so cheap. It's only 2,700 gold. The thorns themselves do almost no damage now. The reflection and Bramblefest is pretty bad compared to what it used to be. And Executioners is just so far out of the way of a lot of the meta champions right now. They just really don't want to be getting Mortal Reminder, you know, in their first 3 items, or it puts them really far behind. Some champs don't even get crit, like Varus doesn't even get crit right now in the meta, and there are a couple other ones, like Ezreal just really, really doesn't want to get crit. So it's just so hard to get the Grievous Wounds on a lot of these champs. And then if things like Leona gets Bramblefest, it just feels so bad, and they don't have to hit Leona. They can just hit other people. So that's part of why the healing is really OP in this meta. So he can get Thornmail, but it's not as effective as it used to be. So anyways, he's good, solid, simple to play tank. He's going to be very effective for the first 20 minutes of the game, and then it can get a little dicey later on. But it's not like you just auto lose if it goes to 25. His win rate actually looked like it went up over time. But anyways, you always do have the Miracle Steal potential too. You could, if you're really far behind, you might be able to flash Steal Baron with a Chomp plus Smite. So that is always on the table. He is one of the best at securing objectives. So that is pretty nice. Just a few more here. So Fiddlesticks, I think, is pretty good. He does have a really high win rate at 53%. I have not seen him perform like super well in my games personally, but he does have the kit to be good versus a lot of the things that are out there right now. So he does clear pretty fast. Now, if he gets invaded, he can definitely get like totally dumpstered by like a Xin Zhao or something like that. He cannot fight. He cannot duel in the early game. But if you do get nice vision control with his ultimate, you know, he can single-handedly win team fights. He can just take over. It just depends on how well he's able to get these ults off and how well he can get the position for those, you know, really sweet flanking ults. So he's all right. Doesn't abuse a lot of the top-level stuff again. Doesn't have Conquer and Triumph. He's going to be Electrocute. Doesn't have... I think that Zanya's is still a trap on him. Like, it is better on him than a lot of other champs out there. But a lot of people kind of have gone away from Demonic Embrace. But, like, that champ is... Or that is, like, 3% higher than Zanya's. I mean, Zanya's is good on him. If you go in and you're afraid they're going to blow you up immediately, you can Zanya's. But just keep in mind that if you take that item, you're giving up a lot of damage to take Zanya's. Even like Void Staff. Void Staff is like 7% higher win rate than Zanya's is. So, like, Zanya's is good, but I always say on the stream that it's like the biggest trap item in League of Legends, or certainly one of them, because people just don't use it correctly. It's just cool. And we all think about all of the, you know, really sweet outplays, you know, that we've seen with Zanya's, but the vast majority of the time, if you really think about it, it does not change the outcome of like 90% of the fights in solo queue. It's like the person's Anya's and then they die anyways. And like the build up to it can feel pretty bad as well. So I don't know. It's okay. Like it does allow you to go in more aggressively. It can bait you into taking bad ultimates too with a lot of people because they'll think, oh, I have Zanya's. Yeah, I can go ahead and ult this, no problem. And their team's like not even on the screen. And they wouldn't do it if they didn't have Zanya's, but they get this sense of security off of having the Zanya's to, you know, make a really dumb engage like that and just get themselves killed. So I'm not saying it's bad in every situation. Obviously, it has really good synergy with his kit. You just have to be very careful when you pick that item and make sure that you're going to be able to use it well, and also that it's needed, right? If they have a bunch of squishies on their team and they're just going to die, like if you just ult in and fear somebody and they die anyways, you don't need the Zanyas, right? It might be better just to go for more damage, just to kill them on that rotation, right? Just to go for something like a, you know, like a Void Staff or even a Morellonomicon. Morellonomicon also has a 3% higher win rate, just to help your team out with those Grievous Wounds. Because I just mentioned how annoying it is for a lot of champs to get Grievous Wounds right now in this current meta with how much they nerf Thornmail and just how the ADC meta is shaking out. It's really tough for a lot of champs to get Grievous Wounds, or it's really annoying and it's really far out of their way. The Bruisers definitely don't want it, right? You don't want to see, like, Viego, you know, getting Executioners, or, I mean, I guess at least he kind of scales with crit, or, like, Camille, or Fiora, or, like, Irelia. Like, they really, really don't want to be getting, you know, Executioners. So if you can get that with Fiddlesticks, that is very nice, especially the fact that Oblivion Orb's only 800 gold is pretty good. So I'm just making the case that there are alternatives to Zanya's, and literally every single one of them has a higher win rate than Zanya's does in solo queue as a second item, okay? So just keep that in mind. It does get a lot better as a third item after you already have enough damage established. You notice here it goes from like 55% to 65% win rate. And then it's actually higher than its other contemporary items. So if you're going to get it, try to get it third if you can, because that's going to give you 2 powerhouse items, and then you can have a utility item after you have enough damage to kill them. But anyway, so Fiddlesticks, pretty good. Shaco, if you're a one-trick on Shaco, he can be very strong. They did nerf him. I think it was this patch. It was either this patch or last patch. It's a little hazy right now. But he's still pretty good, and I think that the AP version is better. Lolytics thinks so too. You can go AD, but the big problem with AD, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is like every lane is going AD right now. There's definitely a shortage of AP champions in the mid and top. They're still picked, but there's a really like strong chance that you could have too much AD on your team in a lot of comps. So having that AP option is very nice, and I think that it just gets you online a lot earlier as well. So it looks like Leandri's is actually the best item on him win rate wise. Now the AP is not going to do as much sustained damage, and I don't think you're going to take towers as well. But I think you can do a lot more burst damage, and I think that sort of if you play really well with the sneakiness of your clones and your boxes and things like that, you can get more damage out of it in team fights. Potentially, like it's going to do more AoE damage off of your boxes and your clone and all that kind of stuff in team fights. So Leandri's is very good. Obviously, just kind of like with Zyra's plants, every time you have a pet, or like your boxes in this case, hitting people, it refreshes the burn, which is really nice on him. And then a lot of people are going for this Cosmic Drive, which makes a ton of sense. You know, your ult is like very high impact. If played really well, it's one of the best ults in the game. Especially if you go for AP version, if that explodes on somebody, it does really high damage, AoE damage, you know, in team fights. So I kind of like the Cosmic Drive adaptation. I don't think I've seen that a lot in solo queue, but I really like the idea of that. And just trying to take over the game off of those 2 items. If you want to go for the AD version, looks like a lot of people are going Duskblade. That does give you resets, which are nice. Stridebreaker does make it very difficult for people to blow you up. It's a pretty OP item. You're able to get close enough to them without them seeing you most of the time, so you can activate that or use the active and then that's going to allow you to stick to them a little bit better because you're going to have the slow, you're going to have the extra 20% movement speed. So that is a very, very good combination with him and the Stride Breaker because you can get close and use it effectively on the back line. So that is very nice. Then I guess you would combine that with either the Collector or Essence Reaver if you want to go for the AD build, and then whichever one you didn't get second, you just get it third. So it's pretty good if you want to be, you know, a little bit tankier and kind of go into being more of a late game backline disruptor. So he has multiple options. You can kind of see what your team needs, you know, and then decide at the end of champion select. But very versatile, very strong, excellent early game ganks, lots of tricks for later in the game, but very, very high skill cap. You have to use him well. There's very little that's guaranteed in his kit. So you have to make full use of it, or he's just going to be trash. Okay. Last couple ones here. We've got Trundle. Now, I know Butter really loves Trundle. He's trying to get me to play him as support. I have seen him, you know, becoming a little bit more popular in some games. I still think that he's primarily a tank breaker. I would just have to watch his matchup into some of these other champs, because the problem is, like, a lot of these top-end champs are very difficult to kill, but at the same time, Trundle's ultimate doesn't help with that a lot. Because Trundle's ultimate steals, like, max health, and it steals armor and magic resist, but they're tanky through means that are not armor or magic resist. And that's another thing that's so insidious about kind of the current balancing situation, is historically you could deal with these very durable champions by getting armor penetration, right? You could just get Lord Dominic's or, you know, whatever in the past, armor penetrating item if you're the AD carry, and then you would be able to get through tanks. But the problem is, with a lot of these champs, they aren't getting a lot of armor, right? Their durability comes from lifesteal, and just various, like, health resets and different mechanics that they have that make it just tough to kill them, right? You've got the Zen invulnerability with his ult, the Gwen basically invulnerability with her ult from ranged champions. You've got Viego with all of his nonsense, resets and heals and all that stuff. Then you have the fact that they can get on you easier than ever with all of these gap closers and stick to you as the AD carry. So there's just, they don't have to get a lot of armor now, and so, or magic resist, and so they're like tanks without being tanks. And so therefore Trundle's ult just doesn't do as much as it used to do. It's not going to stop Steric's, you know, activation either. It's not going to do anything to stop the their healing. You still have to buy Grievous Wounds if you want to deal with that. So that's really my issue with Trundle, and he doesn't have, other than his ultimate, like on hit and all that stuff, he doesn't have any maximum % health. He doesn't have any true damage built into his kit. It's just really, really old. Like, his mechanic on his ult was intended to be like an old school true damage before there really was widespread true damage. You had Cho, but not as widespread as it is now. Almost every new champion that's a fighter has some kind of true damage built into their kit. So he's just not really up to date with the times, in my opinion. But it's possible. I mean, maybe you can duel some of these people. I'd have to see, like, how well does he duel Xin Zhao early? How well does he duel Gwen, you know, at 3 items? He might be able to do it. I mean, if he goes for DS, and then he's also going to get Steric's, because he does steal some of their AD, which is good. He does, you know, himself have some healing with his W. But I don't know. My sense is that it's probably not enough if he's against other fighters, that he's probably still pretty good against, like, Nunu and some of the tanks, but maybe not some of the other champs. But I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe he's better than I think he is. I'll just have to watch him in action a little bit more. They have buffed him recently, but we'll just have to see. So he's kind of on my watch list, but I think he has the potential to be pretty good. His win rate has gone up. As a jungler, I still don't think as support it's going to work. I think he needs a lot of items because he doesn't have that baseline true damage, percentage health, all that stuff in his kit. And then Volibear is another one that is showing up a pretty decent chunk in pro. Like, his win rate is absolutely abysmal. It's 39% globally right now. But if a bunch of people are picking him, there's probably something behind it. He just might have bad matchups into certain champs. I think he's picked as a counter to Gwen, potentially. but I don't know about all that. Let me see. How is he? I can't remember what I had him at in solo queue. About 50%, but he has kind of the criteria that I think make him somewhat strong, just like a lot of these other champs, right? He's got some maximum percent health built into his kit. He can use, DS plus Sterix. I've even seen an AP version of him where he goes for the stacking AP item, this Rift Maker, which actually seems like it's pretty bad right now. I think that's kind of an older build, but a dude in my game was building it. He was doing all right for a decent chunk of the game. But I think it probably is just DS Sterix. Is he going to be able to outduel something like the Xin Zhao? I don't think so. But if you do need somebody that's going to be tankier, that can just jump onto that backline and disrupt a little bit better, maybe you could pick him if Nocturne's banned, or maybe you just want to be tankier earlier. I'm not really sure. But I think there's definitely potential there for Volibear. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that and see. Okay, in the last few, with the couple of minutes we have remaining, Graves did get buffed on this patch. His win rate's up a little bit, but I still think the meta is somewhat rough for him. If you're able to kite some of these other champs, maybe you can, bust him up early, but, with all the gap closers that I mentioned before, I think you've got your work cut out for you. Evelyn's still pretty good. It's the YOLO Q special. A lot of people just don't respect the invisibility. She can just kind of roam around and get a bunch of free kills. Excellent if you have something like a Yumi with you. Can be kind of rough into some of these champs that are just like, unnaturally really tanky though, right? With the Sterix and all the other crap I keep talking about, it's difficult for assassins to kill them, especially stuff like Eve. However, the fact that she has magic damage is definitely a perk because, again, you're going to have a lot of overloaded AD champs out there, or AD teams, I should say. So having a magic damage threat is nice. So you can take over as Eve. It's just a little bit harder, just primarily because of the prevalence of Sterix. Just makes it so difficult to kill a lot of these champs. And then you've got Rengar after that. If you're a good one-trick Rengar, I think it can work. Bruiser Rengar might be able to work some. But there is counterplay to him, and I think he is going to lose a lot of duels because, again, it's difficult to assassinate people. If they have plated steel caps and Sterix and, like, Divine Sunder, good luck. If it's something like Viego or Zen or whatever, it can be tough unless you're really, really far ahead. Olaf seems like he should be better in this meta. He did get a slight buff recently, and his win rate is going up, so definitely keep an eye on Olaf. He feels like the type of champ who might actually be able to kill some of these people. I mean, he can use he's probably not going to use Stride Breaker. It's probably still just going to be the AoE healing item. But I think that he should, in theory, be able to duel some of these champs. Maybe his stats are just a little too low for that, but that's someone I would take a look at, especially if they nerf a couple of the items. Yeah, there we go. Gore Drinker, Sterix. His big issue is he just doesn't have the gap closer. People can just kite him, I feel. Now, if your team has Shirelias, that helps a lot. So if you're like on a team with like a Lulu plus a Shirelias or a Zillion or just something that can speed you up plus Shirelias, his stock goes way up. Or like a Yumi or something like that, his stock's going to go way up. But I think that he does have to hard dominate early, and I just feel like Xin Zhao is the champion that kind of has that niche right now, sort of on lockdown, so he just feels like a worse Xin Zhao. But I think there could be situations for him. Last couple ones that are noteworthy maybe that I could talk about. Ram is still pretty good. Hard nerf to Thornmail has kind of put him behind a little bit. Master Yi still pretty good. Just takes a long time to come online, and I think some of these champions can just bust him up early and even keep up with him at like 2 or possibly even 3 items. So he's still pretty good, but I don't think he gets stuff like Sterix. He's just going to go for like the Dustblade, the full-on damage. And the fact these guys can do heavy damage and be tanky is going to be kind of rough for him. Morgana can be okay. I saw her do like alright in the jungle the other day. If you want a utility AP jungler, she's alright. Rumble's still being played with some success in Pro, although he's fallen off a lot in solo queue. If you need an AP threat, you don't want to play Gwen or Diana or they're banned, he could be decent. Very good in AoE team comms. Udyr has fallen a lot from Grace. I feel like he's just a stat check champion, and his stats were nerfed, and a lot of people are checking him right now. So He's okay if you really want a hard split push jungler, but I think these other bruisers are probably in a better place right now. And I think that's pretty much it as far as I have. We're running out of time, so we're going to go ahead and close it out. I do want to keep it under an hour. But anyways, thank y'all very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. It's quick, it's easy. Just takes a couple of clicks, helps out a ton. And I'll see you on the stream, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a good day.